Okay. All right. Recording
Miguel,
started.
all right, well, thank you for joining us for our Sprint Zero presentation. We're going to be presenting our U Financial application. First introduction. So I'm Philip Stefanos. I'll be working on a little bit of both the front end and the back end.
I'm Miguel. It's nice to meet you guys. I'll be working mainly on the back end.
I'm Caleb Schutz. I'm mostly going to be doing front end React.
I'm Lauren. I'm going to be working on the design and also the front end.
So to start, the problem in the modern day, many people are facing hardships. With the rising cost of living, people are finding it difficult to cover their expenses, and managing their money can be really difficult and overwhelming. People often lose track of how much they're spending and how much they have left. So to fix this, a solution we came up with is the U Financial application. This application will allow users to budget their income. They can input their salaries and figure out how much money they want to divvy up to different things like savings, fun, food, and then users can visualize their spending with data representation. We'll do bar charts, pie charts, and things like that. Frameworks. So for the backend, we're going to be using Express, Node, and SQL for the database. For the front end, we're going to be using HTML, CSS, and React. And then for product tracking, we'll be using Jira.
So for architectural design, we chose to use a system context model. We thought that it would be more useful for our stakeholders so they don't need to understand the internal complexities of our program when looking at our model. So we have a picture of our first diagram that we made, or our first system context model that we made. It starts at number one with the users, where they input the user banking data, which gets sent over to the front end interface, where it is secured and collected. And then that is sent to the back end, where we're going to process that data and then create a user budget based off the parameters that they inputted. Then we're going to send that back to the front end, where we're going to display interactive graphs or tables. And then we're going to send that budget also back to the users, which should improve their quality of life.
Okay, awesome. So now we want to get into how we're going to do this and what's going to break it down. So we first want to develop a product backlog, which will be identifying the tasks needed in order to complete from our user stories. So we're going to be grooming through the backlog as we continue throughout the project timeline, just keeping it updated and adapting to whatever circumstances we run into. And so we use the poker method initially to determine how much effort each task would require. This is all based off team efforts and our capacity of each member. And so we decided to do that and then add prioritization just from top to bottom. And so that gets us into our sprint. So with our sprint, after considering like everyone's external commitments and skill capabilities, you'll see in the next slide that we broke it down by the hours. And so we wanted to make sure is that we were able to determine the required hours and timeline for our first sprint. And then we'll be tackling the skeletal structure of our website. Essentially, we want to make sure we're tackling the login page, the account creation, and to make sure that the user is able to categorize their income and expenses. So is the user able to determine what's an income and what's an expense, and then what type of expense and what type of income they want to put it into. And so in that next slide, you'll see there, Philip, are you able to click there? Awesome. So we want to determine how many hours of the UI would take HTML and SQL. And the reason that it's higher in the beginning is because it's doing most of the back end of the structure of the website. After that, it's just rinse and repeat with different features and specific areas. So that's going to be our first sprint. And then on to the next slide, just to break it down with our user stories, give you guys a little bit of an insight. With our authentication methods, we want to make sure that the user is able to log in with a username and password. And then we want to ask ourselves, should the users be able to reset their passwords, whether it be a password strength requirement, what type of authentication would be using, two-factor verification, or with email or social login. And then in our next slide, you see how flexible should budget categories be, right? So what type of income are we allowing? Are we allowing W-2, 1099, side hustles that they're doing? Should the user be able to set weekly budgets? as well as monthly ones as on top of that. And there will there be recommendations on it. So in the next slide, it also has to do with our expenses, right? What type of expenses are they categorizing? And then how will those users categorize them? And are we going to do fixed expenses or expenses that change every week or change every month? So we want to be able to help the user be able to do that. And then of course, on the next slide, we want to be able to make sure that the user is able to visualize those either through charts like bars or pie charts like how Philip mentioned earlier. And does the user want a visualization of the whole year of their expenses and income and budget, or just the week, or just the bi-week? Because some people get their checks every 2 weeks instead of every week. So we want to make sure that we're able to hit all those points from the stories. And that's how we got into where we are with the sprints and breaking down the product backlog.
So our risk management plan, we have 4 different categories. We have technical, user, operational, and external. So for technical, we came up with that it's probably going to be a high impact just because of the possibilities. There could be a server crash, a software bug, data loss, any kind of vulnerability and security are going to be really big issues for actually any of these categories. But to help us combat any technical problems, we're going to do regular bug fixes, like read through our code, fix anything that looks or causes any kind of problems, and then we're going to do regular encryption to make sure that there's no data loss, no security problems, nothing like that. And then for the user, there's going to be a low impact. It's more of just up to the user and how often they use the program. So a lack of user engagement, maybe misinterpretation of the graphs or pie charts. Maybe they're inputting their budget incorrectly. So to help combat this, we're going to do visualizations. So we're going to make sure that our numbers on our side are correct based on what they're giving us. And then we're going to do overspending warnings. So when it comes to overspending, we're going to have stuff in the red. And then when people are budgeting correctly, we'll have numbers in the green so that they know that they're saving a perfect amount or that they're overspending when it comes to the red numbers. And then for operational, it's another high impact. This could be server downtime, any kind of UI bugs, or slow performance on our end and our platforms. So to help with this, we're going to try to optimize performances, and we're going to have regular data backups to make sure that we don't have any problems on our end when it comes to operating this program. And then externally, it's going to be a low impact just because it's going to be less likely. So cyber attacks, data privacy laws, maybe a non-compliance, but it really just is on us to follow any kind of regulations and guidelines so that we don't do anything wrong on our part. So therefore, no one can do anything. Our users are doing everything right on their part. And then next steps. So next, in our next meeting, we're going to make sure that we have all of our programs that we're using, like React, Node, Visual Studio. We're going to make sure we have all of those downloaded on all of our computers, and that we're going to try to get familiar with them because we're all going to be working together. So even like if I'm familiar with something and someone else isn't, like we're both going to need to get familiar with it so we can help each other out. So that's going to be a big thing that we need to work on, is making sure that we have these platforms that we need and that we know how to use them. And then our first goal is going to be setting up that user login and registration. So that's going to be our first thing that we're going to try to do. And then once we get that, we'll just go through our backlog and kind of help each other out in different areas and make sure that we have what we need implemented by the deadline, hopefully.
Thank you. That's our presentation.
Yep. Thanks.